Ana Mendieta was born in 1948, and she had a happy childhood in Cuba. After the Cuban Revolution, on September 11th, 1961, she was sent to America with her older sister. There was this period of separation from 1961 for a number of years when she was separated from her mother and from her family. And this combination of experiences, her love of nature in Cuba, her love of the culture and the country where she grew up, and the trauma of being separated from her family and her homeland, all these things then found their way into her work. In 1973, she was in Mexico and she found this ancient tomb, and she laid down in the tomb, and she was covered with white flowers. And for her, being covered with those white flowers was like being covered by time and history. That is now considered to be her first silueta, what she called her silueta, which is the silhouette of her body, the shape of her body, and the idea of her body merging with nature. She made 104 films, from 1971 to 1981. And having studied all of that work, I came to the conclusion that there are these themes that appear and reappear throughout her work across all these 10 years. And those are history, memory, culture, the passage of time, and ritual. And those 5 themes are very often distilled through the relationship of the body and the land. And in the burial pyramid, you see her body is covered with stones. So as she's breathing, the stones are falling away, and then she stops this breathing exercise and it becomes still again. And I think in that film, it's as if she becomes a stone, and now she is engaged in this active dialogue with history. And she was fascinated by the classical elements, what we would say are the classical elements of earth, water, air, and fire. One of these themes, one of these ideas that she keeps coming back to is the ancient myth of the tree of life. And this mythology of the tree of life, of course, is found in many different cultures. It's in the Bible, for example, and it's in many different spiritual traditions. Energy Charge, which she made in 1975, is a very short film. It's only about 57 seconds long. And what's so interesting about this film is that she's using all of the contemporary technology of the moment to explore this very ancient idea. In Mexico, there's a tradition of making these firework displays. And she met with a craftsman who could make the fireworks. She created her silueta shape for this craftsman. And at nighttime, she lit this figure up, and all the fireworks lit up at night, and it's filmed and photographed. And when all the fireworks are fully exhausted, the last light that still remains is where her heart would be. And that's the very last light to burn out. Creek is a remarkable film. In this film, she is dispensed with the traditional film structure of narrative. There is no beginning, middle, or end to this film. It's all one continuous story. So on the one hand, on the one side of her body, we could say is the idea of a very peaceful mode of existence. And on the other side of her body, we could say is the fear that might come with being fully exposed. We don't know if something bad could happen, something dangerous could happen. And she takes these two ideas and she holds them in balance. She said that for her, blood had a kind of a magical property. So water can have the connotation of a spiritual quest or a spiritual purification. Likewise, blood can have many different meanings, and she drew on all of those different meanings. So one meaning for her was the way blood has been used in religious ritual in the Catholic Church. She grew up a Catholic. Blood is also an element in Santeria ritual, and she was exposed to that in Cuba. Finally, in January of 1980, when she was a grown adult, she was able to go back to Cuba and find her family members and see her old home. So she went back to the caves of Jaruco, which it's believed that this is the birthplace of humanity in Cuba, these caves. And she made a monumental series of sculptures on the walls of these caves. What's so interesting about the silhouette in Ochun is that the figure itself is not a contiguous figure anymore. There's an opening at the top and an opening at the bottom. So the figure is pointing towards Cuba, and the water, which is common between Cuba and America, is flowing through the figure. And so in many ways, this film represents a reconciliation of the great story of her life, which was the struggle to reconcile her past in Cuba and her adult life in America. And how could she keep these two things together, and how could she make sense of this separation and this return? And in Ochun, we find that she's made sense of it by connecting these two things with the water going through the silhouette.